Anyways, well,
In conclusion, we will summarize the key points. And, we will begin the lesson with an engaging question. Like, for an example, we will ask, how do you and your family usually travel? And how do you think people traveled in the past before cars and buses and modern bicycles were created? Furthermore, we will show visual pictures and images of old transportation, like donkeys with wagons, um, like old steam trains that developed over the years. We will also show images about the old bicycle that they used before modern bicycles were created, just as it is on the presentation, versus the modern transportation pictures and images also that's presented on the presentation of the modern train, the modern bicycle, airplanes that were developed, the modern ships, and so on. We will also mention to the learners that walking is the oldest means of transportation that is still used today, even in the modern times. Furthermore, we will discuss briefly about the different transportations that we get, like the air transportation, the water transportation, and then the land transportation. But the main focus is that the transportation in the past were very different from the modern use of transportation. We will also discuss the advantages and disadvantages, like we will say the advantages of the olden transportation that was used in the past, like by using the donkeys and the wagons, is that it was far less air pollution, so that is one advantage. So there were no gases that were released in the air, versus the modern transportation, where it's loads of air pollution that's being caused by gases released in the air. Then we will also look at the disadvantages, like the transportation in the past were very slower, and the animals couldn't carry very heavy loads and couldn't travel very long distances for long periods of time. Whereas in the modern times transportation, it's you can carry heavy loads on trucks and buses, and it can also travel long distances.
the ways of transportation, as you can see, changes from the cart, the first bicycle, the first locomotive, a chariot, the first motorcycle, and hyperspeed or electric train. Um, Trucks were invented, and vehicles at the end of the day with a working petrol engine or uh, wound up engine. So over time, from the first airplane as well, from the Wright brothers and the first locomotive and the penny farthing bicycle and so on, the evolution of vehicles were so immaculate that technology advanced very fast since 50 years ago, basically. From the 1980s until 2025, it is been evolving so fast that you can have self-driving cars now. You have electric vehicles, you have solar vehicles, you have hydrogen vehicles. All those type of vehicles play a big part in getting people from point A to point B, which makes it much more easier for people also to get from point A to point B. Where back in the old days they had to travel only along coastal banks with a rowboat or a sailboat. They had to uh, only travel certain, not very far distances from a coal train with a locomotive, as train tracks weren't laid out yet and infrastructure weren't invented yet. Nevertheless, electricity. So today, for us to be able to travel in much more comfort is pretty immaculate. Well, and to summarize, the transportation changed throughout the years. The difference between the transport used in the past and used in the modern times, the learners will be able to identify it physically and be able to know the in-depth history about those vehicles or types of transportation, rather, and why change and the advantages and disadvantages from pollution-wise to carbon footprints to all those sort of things that plays a big impact to the environment, to the immediate community, and to themselves and to the world in general. And then for homework, we can ask parents what transportation they used 10 years ago and write a paragraph for them to write a paragraph on the transportation they used. It's not necessarily about parents, it's more also about like grandparents if they have, or somebody older in their family, because maybe the parents nowadays are quite young, so it's not much difference between now and then. But maybe the grandparents were able to tell great stories from maybe when they were still a small child, about 10 years old. They might have used chariots back then and carts back then, or just horseback riding. So those stories will be quite interesting.